Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody. I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, E.B. Sanders. E.B. is a career coach who helps creative types ditch their fears and make decisions with confidence so they can achieve the fulfillment they really want. She went from college professor to recruiting and staffing specialist to career coach, all in the name of helping people find their thing. Her mission is to convince everyone that they don't have to choose between happiness and success. In her words, I want everyone to be happy in their careers, like belting out Beyonce into your organic loofah in the shower on Monday mornings. Happy. Welcome, E.B. Sanders, to Work from the Inside Out.
Thank you so much for having me, Tammy.
Oh, I am so happy to have you here, and thank you for joining us from your home office in San Francisco.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful day here.
Oh, so as you know, I think we're kind of kindred spirits here about wanting people to choose between, not to have to choose between happiness and success. But we're going to talk about you today. So Work from the Inside Out, it's all about the twists, the turns, the choices that we make in our careers. You've made several changes in yours. Take us back to some of the earlier years, some of the starting places for you, and how those might have informed where you are today.
Wow. Well, the early years were kind of interesting in that I had an incredibly supportive family, but we were not a family of university graduates by any means. So while I was definitely told I could do whatever I wanted and I could be any type of person that I wanted, I didn't have a lot of role models past my blue and pink collar parents, which was fine. I had an amazing childhood. They were super supportive. But I didn't, again, have those examples. But somewhere along the way, I really got this kind of bug in my ear, this idea that not only did I want to go to college, that I wanted to teach college. And so I sort of started on this route. It was a very meandering. It took several colleges and quite a few years for me to go to school, go to grad school, and then sort of not leave. I was definitely that student still roaming the halls that they just ended up hiring because I never went home. But it was a job that I really had known that I had wanted. It was very much, what people term a dream job. I had worked very, very hard to get it. I absolutely loved what I did. Didn't want to do anything else. I was just really, really fulfilled and happy in that career emotionally. I was not fulfilled and happy in that career monetarily or career path-wise. So those are all considerations that got to work together. And unfortunately, while one was absolutely there for me, the things that allow you to have a quote unquote successful life, by meaning you can pay your bills and see a future for yourself, that support was not there for me. So unfortunately, my dream job was my dream job until it wasn't.
So I want to go back for a moment. You said, your family was super supportive and you knew from a fairly young age that you wanted to go to college. And then when you got there, you didn't want to leave. When did you know that you really wanted to be a part of that world in a professional way and not just as a student? Not to say just as a student, as if being just a student, but I mean, when did you know that there was something there for you in a different way than being a student?
It's interesting. So my first job, I had many, many jobs as a kid. We were very much encouraged to make our own money. And one of my very first jobs, I was about 13 years old, was a swim instructor. And Yeah. And I loved just the aspects of teaching. I loved that, I got to have these kids every single day and seeing them progress. And that is really what got kind of the teaching bug in me.
Okay.
And in terms of school, I was one of those kids that school was easy for me in terms of the material that we learned. I enjoyed the process of learning. And so having had this early on teaching bug and enjoying the academic aspect of school, it seemed just really natural. Like, oh, you can do this as a job. And it's funny, I never wanted to teach elementary school, never wanted to be that, cute kindergarten teacher, didn't want to teach high school. It was always very much, I wanted to be able to read the big books. And I wanted to be able to dig into, kind of old histories and do things on a deeper level that I knew if you taught at sort of elementary, high school, it was very much kind of very surface level. And I knew I was that kid that if I found a book I liked, I geeked out and read, everything else the author had ever written kind of thing. And I knew that was a process I wanted to continue. And so for me, it wasn't a big revelation. It all just sort of clicked and made sense very early on for me. It just seemed like a natural progression. So that's how I kind of always thought about it. And I kind of tested the waters. Like I said, my parents didn't go to college, so it wasn't even expected that I would go. So we tested out community college first. And I realized I loved community college. I kind of used to joke that it's like high school with ashtrays. And that it still felt very comfortable, and it didn't feel like a big, scary university experience. And it felt very familiar to me.
Yeah.
And I loved my professors. I loved my classes. I loved the fact that my student body, they all went and did jobs outside of school and came back. And it wasn't that typical 4-year sort of isolated continuance of, not elitism, but it's a different experience than a community college. Yeah. And I truly love that. And I actually, one of my very first teaching jobs, I went back and taught at the very first community college I ever went to. And that was the best experience ever. I loved it. I think, community colleges, especially, in the state of California, they don't get the credit they're due. The professors that teach there also teach at some of the world's best universities. They have the same education. They're there because they want to be there.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
It was such an amazing experience. And I loved those schools, and I loved that I was able to go back. But for me, it wasn't a big lightning bolt sort of thing. It all just sort of seemed to make sense for me.
It almost sounds like you kind of found your rhythm at an early age, and it was something you just kept going with, and it felt natural. It wasn't like, oh, now I've got to go off to college and pack all my bags and leave home. And, it's this like big life altering decision. It sounds like you just kind of went with the flow in a way.
Yeah. And I understand why a lot of students do that. They want to get away from home and go do an experience that's different. But I had such a supportive, lenient upbringing, and I had already traveled a bunch that I didn't feel like I had to, leave and go do the big university thing to experience something new. I was sort of allowed to experience all the things I wanted to prior to that. So I didn't have to have that. Not that there's any one right or wrong way to do any of this. But but my experience was very much just, like you said, like a natural progression.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did you study? It sounds like, and you said that you went in and out of school a little bit over those years. So what were your, what did that look like? Now you got me curious too.
It was really interesting. So I started out at community college, and then I wanted to make up some other classes that they didn't have. So I went to another community college during kind of the off season. And then California was opening up a few new state universities as they were kind of doing some rearranging of budgets. And I ended up going to one of the very new schools. It was not prepared to be opened. It was very much a political move. It was on an old naval base. It was a disastrous mess. But I was one of the very first, number of students to go through there. But that meant they didn't even have their curriculum set. So our entire year really spent was developing their curriculum, which was totally crazy. So I didn't really study anything other than how to make teaching work, which totally informed my career.
Wow.
Yeah. I was in the first class of Monterey State students, which still is so strange to me.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then so I left there. And since they were actually not an accredited state school yet, I had to make up that whole year. So I
Oh
could
my goodness.
went back to another community college. And then I finally had a counselor sit down and say, okay, you've taken all of these random classes and done all of these things. You've taken like 3 languages and all this. Like, if we lump this all together and you take 2 more classes, you are a liberal arts graduate. I was like, great. Sounds fabulous. Yeah, I think the question that she actually asked me was, do you ever want to graduate? And I honestly didn't have an answer to that question because I loved going to school. But yeah, so I was told I was a liberal arts student, and I was shuttled into a program where it's really great in California. If you go to a community college and you sign up for a program, they basically shuttle you into a 4-year school at the junior level. So you're basically guaranteed a space. So I went from community college to a 4-year, but I entered at the junior year mark.
Yeah.
And then so I ended up studying humanities and liberal arts and truly loving it. Truly finding, sort of ended in it as a catch-all, because I had taken like architecture and art history and anthropology and all of the things, but truly found my footing when I got to, a 4-year university. And it was much more structured for me because I was put on a plan of like, here's the classes to take, here's what you've been studying and what this all looks like. And really, again, found my footing in the liberal arts and humanities. And that's what I stuck around for and went to grad school for humanities. And that's what I ended up teaching and absolutely adored it.
So, it's funny to hear you talk about all this, because a lot of people, when they talk about those years, if they didn't know exactly what they wanted to do, they talk about that period of time of exploration, of feeling some stress, of feeling lost, of not finding their way, and also the angst around, what am I going to do with this when I'm done, kind of thing. And I'm hearing you're like a kid in a candy shop there. And when I hear you talk about, sitting down with the counselor who's saying to you, so you've been a liberal arts major, and you're thinking, great. I'm thinking this counselor could have said anything to you and you would have said great. Like, you really, you didn't care what they called you. You were just happy. And I don't know if I'm getting this right, whether you really were just that happy, because those, for some people in that, time of life, let's say, late teens, early 20s, there's a lot of people who are really trying to find themselves. They're seriously trying to find themselves. And it sounds like you were just, trying to decide, what color jelly beans you wanted. And that was about it. Am I getting that right?
I mean, yeah, I think also because I did also work the entire time I was in school. I always had a succession of jobs. So I had a very much a sense of purpose outside of the school. And I always supporting myself and paying for my school. My parents helped as much as they could, but they definitely weren't able to pay for me to go to university, right? So I think because I had the worry of, what am I going to do? How am I going to create a career for myself? How am I going to pay the bills? I didn't have that stress because I knew I could already take care of myself financially, whatever that looked like. And I had been treated as an adult. And I think that's sort of what we term adulting, right? You're taking care of yourself, you're paying for your things. Since I had been fairly young. And so that worry was taken away from me. And so, yeah, it's not that I was super willy-nilly, like I did enjoy the jelly beans, but I wasn't so much focused on, I have to pick a thing. Because I was, like you said, I was enjoying the process. I very much loved learning, and I loved learning it in the college setting. And I think somewhere in my subconscious, my brain just sort of understood, like, hey, you love it here. You're just going to be here. And I think that since the back of my head, or if you had asked me to vocalize it, I probably couldn't have, but definitely my brain knew what was going on and knew that was going to be my environment in some fashion. So I didn't feel that stress. I didn't feel that pressure. I mean, not to say that once I graduated with my BA, that then there was a lot of weight of like, okay, what now? Because it's not like you go from BA. I didn't go straight from BA to grad school. I couldn't afford that. And so I did a lot of soul searching in between. I moved, I moved across the country. I had a weird succession of jobs. I made some poor decisions, as you're supposed to.
Right. Yes, you are. You're supposed to make poor decisions. Yes.
Yeah.
it's just interesting to hear about those years, and it's kind of like almost like a nice reframe, to use a coaching term, I guess, because a lot of people don't describe those years in quite those terms. And then also to hear that you worked through that whole time and pretty much, was relatively self-sufficient with some help from your folks. Other people would depict that as a time of struggle or whatever. And so I'm not like trying to say to you, didn't you struggle? Like, tell me the other part, tell me the dark side. I'm not looking at that. And it's not even comparing you to other people as much as just appreciating the perspective that you bring to this time and how much this really was in your DNA, that you found something you really loved to do, and you were enjoying it so much that it didn't matter what you needed to do to make it all happen. I mean, I'm curious what kinds of work you were doing during those years.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, to go back a second, the reason I look at it this way, as I was just, maybe some people would say like I was struggling or I was stumbling along, but I think in that I was lucky that my parents, and there wasn't this long history of university graduates in my family, because there was no expectation. It could look like anything because nobody had done it before.
Yeah.
So there wasn't pressure of it looking like a particular thing. A lot of, younger generations feel as they got to do it best, if not better than their predecessors. Right. So for me,
really
the only expectation for me was that this is going to sound now a little strange, or maybe not, but the only expectation for me was that I was going to learn to type and be a secretary. And for all intents and purposes, if I had done that, my family would have considered me very successsul. That was the program.
Yeah,
right?
I understand.
And so the fact that I did anything different was totally fine. So in between there, if you name a job, I can guarantee I've had it. I was a housekeeper. I was a bartender. I worked in retail. I worked in a record store for a long time, which I absolutely loved and adored. Like any job that you can possibly think of, I've done. I worked on construction sites. I had a hot pink hard hat. I've done all the things.
I love it. So that's great. I mean, what a great background to have as a career coach, that you can talk about, and say, look, I've done it all.
Absolutely. And I'm a huge advocate for trying it all.
Yeah.
As long as you can feed yourself and your immediate needs are cared for. I am a big proponent of experimentation and, exploration, because while you think you might know what a job is like, until you're living it day to day, you have absolutely no idea.
Right.
So I think the best way to figure that out is through exploration. And were all those jobs great? No, obviously not. But I think you're right. Having had all of those jobs and gone through that experience absolutely allows me to be a better coach.
Yeah. Well, you learn. I mean, I don't think it's a secret that we've all had experiences that didn't go well for one reason or another. We learn from that, and hopefully we don't repeat it, but we, springboard from that into something else that hopefully goes better, or that we learn something from, and we move on. So you loved the liberal arts, you loved the humanities, and it sounds like you had your sights set on graduate school, but you needed to kind of fortify before you could take that step.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I had kind of a grandiose idea of what grad school would be, because again, had no experience with it. And so I thought if I was going to go to grad school, I was going to do it big. So I had my sights set on Columbia. So I moved to New York to establish residency, and I was going to do the Columbia grad school thing, which did not end up being how it all went down. I ended up coming back to California, going to San Francisco State, and just having an absolutely wonderful experience. It's just, for a lot of reasons, a lot of the monetary, that's what worked out best for me. And I absolutely loved it. And I had an incredibly supportive kind of academic system there. And it was really great for me. And I do think about how my life would go had I stayed and done the New York big grad school thing and done Columbia. I have friends who have done it, and I think I'd still choose my path. And having gone through grad school, it's so much work. And once you're finished with it and you get a paper, it's just, everyone I know has the same experience. It's very much, wait, that's it? It's like the most anticlimactic thing ever for everyone who's ever done it. So I'm still so glad that I did it. And I'm so glad that it worked out the way that it did. It was very much one of those, it happened the way it was meant to happen. And I got to teach what I wanted to teach. And because I came back here, like I said, I got to teach at that community college that I had loved and adored. And I got to teach the best classes, and I had so much fun. And they had such an open and young department for the humanities. And so they were very encouraging of kind of experimentation when it came to the curriculum and all sorts of things. So it all fell into place the way it was meant to.
So tell me a little more about the humanities, because that means a lot of different things to me. And it sounds so broad-based. So did you have particular interests in areas of the humanities, or what was it that drew you to the humanities?
Here's the funny thing. When I first started taking humanities classes at the grad level, I hated it because it was taught by old white professors who were teaching us old dead white guys. and I remember the very first day of class, just raising my hand and saying, is this what we're learning? Is this it? And the response being, this is the humanities. This is what you learn. And I was just like, oh, no. Come then, once I'd been there for a while and got that base, realizing, of course, the humanities were basically just the history of human thought, how humans solve problems creatively. And very much so in like the last 20 years plus, people have been trying to break away from the old dead white males of ancient Greece version of humanities.
Right.
So I really took it into, I was focused on censorship of arts coming out of the homosexual community. And very much the culture wars that had been going on in the late 80s and early 90s due to that. So I was really focused on these outsider artists, these outsiders who were told for reasons of their race, their sexuality, their gender, all of the things that they were not acceptable, not just artists, but not acceptable people, and how that came out in their art and what that meant for kind of like the socioeconomic climate at the time. So that's what I chose to focus on. And the courses that I taught, wonderfully in California, we have these academic statutes that only 30% of your curriculum can be like old dead white guys. The rest have to be people of color, people of different genders, non-Western work. So it was really great that I was really allowed then to open up and teach things that I knew kids were not being exposed to because I hadn't been exposed to it. And I wasn't that much, farther ahead than them. So that was really what I chose to focus on. So I focused on film, fiction, creativity, mostly outsider art, which is a strange term, but it's a technical one.
Right.
And I absolutely loved it. I had kids who had been so sheltered their whole lives, and they got to school and they were very uncomfortable in my classes.
Yeah.
And I looked at that as a really good thing.
Yeah.
I allowed them to get up and walk out if they needed to, but they were required to come talk to me about why. And I loved challenging them kind of in a loving way is the best way that I can put it. I wanted to make sure I showed them things that people weren't going to show them.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I asked them questions that they hadn't been asked before.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, we could have a whole episode of a podcast just about this, but I do want to sort of, it sounds like you were really taking kind of an interdisciplinary approach to this, that you could look through a whole variety of lenses at what you were teaching. I don't know if you blended that with, it sounds like it was very social sciencey as well.
I mean, I think that, anything in the humanities has to do with how humans are creating things and why they're creating things, right? That's nothing, none of it's done in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And I think if you take art and just put it on a pedestal in a museum and you don't discuss how it was created and the why it was created, that it sort of, and not useless isn't the right word, but it's definitely not the point of it, right? So that was, I think, if I wanted my students to walk away with anything, it was that they were a part of the system and they were a part of why these things were being created. These films that were being created weren't outside of their experience, right? These conversations that we're having, and the fact that humans have been doing these types of things since humans started doing anything, that it wasn't new, that also while they weren't creating any of these new ideas, that these ideas had been floating around for a long time, and how humans handling them in new ways was different. So I just wanted them to feel connected.
Yeah.
And I think the only way to do that is to talk about the broader human experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. I can see why this was something that you could really devote yourself to. And it must have been, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it must have been a very difficult decision for you to depart from that world to the extent that you have. Because it's clear that this is something that your heart and soul was in it. And yet it sounds like I know a lot of people who have made the decision to leave the academic life for a whole variety of reasons, but many of the same reasons that you've talked about, because it just became somewhat untenable in some ways. So take us forward a little bit. Where did you go, and what were some of the turning points for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I sort of feel of it is it wasn't a choice. It was sort of put on me, but that's a whole other longer discussion. But yes, I chose to stay where my family and my loved ones were. And to do that, I had to give up that career if I wanted to be mentally healthy and be able to eat and pay the electric bill, right? So I then floundered. This is where my struggle comes in. I think I had this later. Maybe I had that same experience that a lot of people do in college. I spent like the next 4 to 5 years in what I call my messy middle, where I love teaching, and I only wanted to be teaching, but I couldn't just be teaching. So I didn't want to be good at anything else, but I had to do something else. So I took a succession of jobs that either I didn't actually want, or that I knew I would be bad at because I didn't want to be good at them. And I sort of kept a foot in it teaching. I would teach a night class here, there, always keeping my foot in, thinking someday it would click and I'd find a way to make it work. Or they'd come back and tell me, yes, you can have tenure and we'll pay you all the money. Like, no, obviously that was never going to happen, but I could not divorce myself completely from it. And so I really struggled in that my identity was so tied into that. I was so much who I was and what I loved doing. I could not see the opportunity in front of me to find something else, to go through that same exploration phase, to do all of the trying things out just for the love of trying things out. I could not view it in the same way. It was very much, I was looking at an end goal and thinking, okay, well, I have to think of a thing that's next. If it can't be this, but I don't want it to be anything else but this. So I just was in sort of a haze, not allowing myself to be the full version of me and do the things well. And it was a struggle. So I went through a lot of what a lot of people who are changing careers do. They do things that they can do, not necessarily things they want to do. Right.
Oh. That's the truth, and I think it's a natural thing to do that, though. I talk to people about this all the time. People do I hear people say this, well, I could do this. And I always say to people, well, I could clean houses or clean toilets for a living. I'm good at it. I hate it, but I'm good at it. And, but I always use the toilet cleaning example because I figure that one is about as universal as it could get, as something that most people probably know how to do, but don't necessarily find appealing as a job. So it's kind of like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because even with that, like I have a housekeeper who has worked with my family for like 10 years now. Her business is so solid. She is such an amazing entrepreneur. She loves scrubbing the toilet to make it look the best.
I get it. I'm talking specifically about well, anyway.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally get what you're saying because I had been the housekeeper. I also hate that, but it is, again, one of those skills that I could do. And I thought, but it's just someone's dream job is someone else's nightmare.
That's right.
Don't ever look at them flipwise. And then do this like, oh, well, I can't go after a job that I want because I won't make money. So I'll just do a thing that I can. And it's also like a knee-jerk reaction of like, okay, well, I can do admin work, so I'll become a secretary, which is what I did for some time. Oh, awful idea. And yes, I did. There were multiple people and types of fields. And it was awful. It was the stupidest move that I could have made.
Why do you say that, though? Why do you say that was the stupidest move?
Because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew it wasn't that. Okay. I absolutely knew it wasn't that. And instead of taking the time to step back and really analyze who I was and what I wanted, I sort of was pouting because I couldn't have exactly what I wanted at that moment. I couldn't enjoy the process. So I took jobs where it wasn't fair of me to take a job and not do great at it because I didn't want to be good at it and make other people's work more difficult, things like that. It was just,
in a way, it almost wasn't fair to you, too, because you weren't giving yourself, you were just trying to plug the hole rather than let yourself just live with the hole for a while.
And it wouldn't even have had to be that long. Yeah. And, I've got clients that do this, too. When I ask them what they want to do, if they have any idea, they give me a list of skills of things they've already done, which we know if those were skills making them happy, they wouldn't be coming to me as a client.
Right. That's right.
But when you're in that moment, you can't think logically like that.
No.
You're so swirly, and you just want someone like the old fairground machine. You want to pop in a quarter and have like a little, genie hand you a card that says, this is what you should do for a living.
Right. Exactly.
That's all we want in that moment. And unfortunately, that doesn't exist. And I was basically, because that didn't exist, I was just pouting, and I was reactionary, and I was doing things that didn't make me or people around me happy because I was so upset about this loss of this first thing that I had loved.
You were grieving
so much. Yeah, absolutely. And I always frame it as it's like being divorced. It's like you're going through this grieving process. And if you were telling someone, oh, I got divorced, they'd understand like, oh, I'll bring you some ice cream and here's a nice blanket.
Right.
If you're going through this with your career, which can be very much the same emotional response, no one's there to tell you like, oh, we didn't really like your career anyway. Like no one's there with the chocolate bars. No one's there with the fluffy pillow and the sad movies. And so you're not really allowed to grieve. You're just expected to move on, get another job, pay your bills, continue being a grown-up, right? Which is, but we're also told to be so invested in our careers,
right?
That when that is taken from us, how are we meant to just switch gears? We're not automatons.
Right.
That's not
just go get another job, right? Oh, and just pick yourself up by the bootstraps and just go do it on your own, right? Don't get help. Don't ask anybody to, I mean, I see this all the time. I'm sure you do too, where somebody will have gotten laid off from a job, or they've lost a job they really loved, maybe even a job they didn't love that much, but a job that they appreciated having. And they try for even 4 months, 6 months, completely on their own to get the next job. Don't ask anybody for help. And then they wonder why no one's calling them.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're in their own little bubble.
It absolutely. And I am a huge proponent of you can't do it alone.
Nope.
And I mean, you would never expect, going back to the relationship analogy, you would never expect that you would go through a breakup completely on your own and not ever telling anybody that you were sad, or asking them, to have a little chat with you on the phone, or to tell you it's going to be okay. But for some reason, yes, with our careers, we're expected to just, like you said, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, do it on your own, not ask anyone for help. If you take a step back and look at that logically, physical impossibility to pick yourself up from your bootstraps. Just not in physics possible, right?
Yeah.
So how do we start with that as being our model for anything? And if you then look at like how have people functioned in the world in terms of careers and success, right? There's the networks. That's why we call it the good old boy network, right? These networks are out there. That's how those careers before women and anyone else was allowed to do them, that's how they were done. They weren't done alone. All of these huge mythologies we've built of there's self-made men. They are not self-made men.
No, they're not. You are so right. It's so true. They were not. In fact, you probably have seen this in your practice. I know I have in mine. The person who has had a, 25, 30-year career, they reach, the top, and then all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out and they haven't even had a resume done. They still want to work. They're trying to keep up a certain lifestyle or whatever that is for them. And lo and behold, every job they've ever had was always through another referral. And they've never, ever had to look for a job. And I'm not saying this as a criticism of them. I'm saying this because it's proving the point that you're making, that most people find their jobs through another person or another, some kind of word of mouth. And yet when you bring the idea up to somebody, well, you need to do some networking. They're like, oh.
Absolutely. And we have this idea that it's completely acceptable and expected for a certain type of person, but it's not really considered networking. It's just, talking to your fellow people of your same ilk. Whereas then there's the cheap name tag, big conference group, with bad shrimp balls and, paper cups of wine. And that's a whole different thing. And that's terrifying to people. And it's because there's an entire base of people who have never been expected to have these sort of glad, handy conversations, and the understanding that anyone that you know personally is part of your network. It
Absolutely.
doesn't have to be a big, scary thing, but a lot of us aren't taught that, right? No. It's new and it's foreign and it is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But as long as you start looking at it the way the kind of those people who the rug is being pulled out from under a bit, how they got to where they are, and follow that model of your fellow colleagues, your family, your friends, your neighbors, the guys at the dog park you chat with. Those are all very professional networking opportunities.
They all are. I know I'm how you, let's say, filled in that gap, that stressful, distressing gap that you were feeling and moved ahead and decided to pursue this life of a career coach, become a career coach. What, or am I skipping ahead too fast?
There's a little skip, but it's not too skippy. So while I was doing admin work, before I'd gone to grad school, I'd worked at some ad agencies, just kind of typical supporting myself, gig after gig, very admin style.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I needed to get back to the corporate world, again, it was a knee-jerk reaction. Like, I can be, an admin assistant. I've been in this world before. I still have some contacts. Let me make that work. And I picked up a few admin roles. Very quickly understand, like day one, knowing that was a bad fit. And making friends with the HR director, because she was a lovely, warm, genuinely good person who understood I was miserable, but also understood I was kind of in an impossible position. I was supporting someone who was, impossible, all of the things. And she did her best to support me. And we kept in touch even after I left that role. And she had moved on to a couple agencies left. And she's like, look, she called me and she's like, I've got a role that I think is perfect for you. She's like, it's nothing you've ever done before. You technically don't have the experience, but I know you and I know you're perfect for it. Again, it was having that network, letting her know who I was and what I was interested in. And she was right. I had never done this job before. And in the interviews, a couple of people were like, why are you interviewing this? You've never done this before. And it was just because she was vetting me and saying, no, she's exactly who we need. And so that's how I made my way into recruiting and staffing and resource management. And that was that role. Like I had worked at a temp agency prior to grad school, but it's, so I'd had some recruiting and staffing, learning and development sort of stuff in the back of my head, but that was a completely different role. And so she knew I could do it. So, and then I really did feel like, I get to help people do what they want to do all day. Mm-hmm. Oh, this I like.
Yeah.
So then I really did feel comfortable. I felt at home. I knew it was a job that I could do and I enjoyed it. And I stayed in that role for a few years and sort of found myself as a de facto career coach where people would come sit on the couch in my office where I had my box of Kleenex and a lot of tears would happen. I had lots of criers who, they were struggling in their careers, and these are creatives. So they're also just very sensitive and they wanted to do good work. And I loved helping them as much as I possibly could, but I was beholden to a paycheck from the company they were with. So my advice had to be limited. I couldn't tell them that they would do better leaving us. I couldn't tell them that they would be able to work on certain projects when I couldn't staff them on those projects. And so how I got to owning my own practice is I wanted to be able to help them the most that I could help them without the constraints of someone else telling me what I could and could not tell them. And so because I have an amazingly wonderful, supportive spouse who said, look, you don't want to do what you're doing anymore. You want to do this new thing. And I know you're working towards it. Just do it. And instead of me, kind of saving up, the year's worth of salary to become an entrepreneur and do all the things and make sure everything was perfect before I did, I was allowed to take a leap and do it because my supportive spouse. And from day one, I knew it was the right thing for me. It's terrifying being an entrepreneur and doing a new thing. But I had the same feeling as when I was originally going to school. I was enjoying the process. And that's how I knew it was right for me.
Yeah.
And so my coaching practice is wonderful and I absolutely love it. And I love the clients that I get to work with. And I love that I get to choose the work that I do. And I still, years into it, loving the process of it. That's how I know it is so much the right thing for me. So it's been, again, terrifying, it's scary, and there's tons of unknowns. But I wouldn't change it for anything. Yeah.
Well, there is something about being a coach that also is, I would say, it's not exactly like teaching, but there is a teaching component within it if you handle it that way. And so I would imagine that being a coach does sort of feed that part of you to some degree. And when you talked about yourself as a professor, you talked about this part of you that really liked to nurture the learning in others. And I think that coaching does do that. It is a nurturing process of nurturing somebody else's ability to engage and be empowered to make their own discoveries and to also begin to know themselves in a way that they can learn themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's whether, I am teaching a 19-year-old student or I'm helping a 45-year-old executive through a career change, it is all about asking them the questions and all about them showing them that they can ask questions and they can learn in new ways and they can discover new things about themselves, about the world, about how they want to show up in it.
Yeah.
And that has been really great for me to understand. It took me a while to get there, to connect all three of my careers. There's this giant red line through them. It doesn't matter who it is, title be damned. Who I am in all of these roles is I've been helping people figure out how they want to show up in the world.
There you go, right?
Yeah. And it is all about questions. And that is what good coaching is about, right? Asking the questions and allowing the student, the coachee, to come to realizations that work for them, that are best for them, that allow them to see what they need to see. And that's exactly what I was doing in the classroom.
Yeah.
There's different metrics for outcomes. Like I've got to do some, tests and exams and essay writings. And in a lot of, because that's my background, I give my coaching clients lots of homework and there is lots of writings and things, but the metrics are completely different. And it's all about, an individual definition of success versus a grade mark. But it's all the same process. And it is why I love what I'm doing. And I am able to teach, and the way I coach in different ways for different people allows me to be more of a kind of an old school teacher at some points and a lot more of a collaborator in others. But it is all coming down to asking those questions, which is wonderful. Yeah.
I love it. Tell us what you're up to these days specifically in terms of your coaching practice and what kinds of clients you work with and how people can reach you.
Absolutely. So I have my coaching practice set up so that I work with people in 3 different ways. People who are super entry level into coaching, or they're looking for a self-paced experience, I actually have an online course that someone can take. It's called Career Change with Confidence, and it is all about making those big decisions with confidence. I then have a group program, which I love and adore. It's so much fun for me. And it's a, me and a very small group of people all working towards the same end goal, which is making big career pivots for themselves. And then I also do very much one-on-one coaching, which is bread and butter is not the right word, but it is like the crux of my coaching program. And I work with what I term creative types. And they're not creatives with a capital C. They are people who are willing to play, willing to explore, willing to enjoy the process, and are okay with there not always being a right or wrong answer. And really willing to kind of examine and question and have fun with it. And I love my clients. They're absolutely amazing. So I like to have 3 different access points for people, whatever they're comfortable with. It allows me different ways of working with people. And yeah, I just couldn't be happier with how it's kind of all set up now. And they can find me at ebsanders.com. Everything is available there.
That's wonderful. It's a very engaging website, I must say myself. People can also subscribe and receive all kinds of messages and memos from you via email. And I am on the list. And I would say that it's very engaging. You are very, very engaging, and you give out a lot of great information. And I think that people can really benefit from being connected to you. So I would encourage people to sign up for your email list as well. So, EB,
thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today. This has been so helpful for people to hear about your journey and the ways in which you've moved through it. And take a look at her website. It's a lot of fun.
Please do come join. There's a lot of free resources on there as well. And I do basically give away all the goodies for free. So I don't like to hold anything back from people. That's not fair. So yeah, please do come sign up and do get, my emails and come, shoot me a private email. I love having all the conversations. So please do.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Tammy. This has been amazing.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with E.B. Sanders. It was so interesting to speak with her to learn about her personal and professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources or links mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at tammygoolerloeb.com. Just look for episode 130. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Do you feel maybe just a little stuck? Get specialized group and individualized support, insights, and accountability from a brilliant mix of professional women in a safe, non-judgmental, creative space. Join one of my small hybrid mastermind coaching groups, starting on a rolling basis. You can learn more at https://bit.ly/navigating career change. If you were inspired by this episode with EB, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygoolerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.